Good morning, 8th grade students. We are continuing our book, The Greatest Treasure Hunt in History. Moving right along, we are on page 118, chapter 9, Getting Help. Florence, Italy, November 1944. Throughout a wet Tuscan fall, Fred Hart continued salvaging all he could of his beloved Florence. Nearly every building in the city center needed terracotta roof tiles at a time when torrential rains created a new threat to the city's cultural heritage. Each day brought progress, but Hart felt frustrated that it was always measured in increments, not giant leaps. The same was true for the boys up in the mountains north of Florence who were fighting relentless rain and boot-sucking mud as much as they were the German defenders they often could not see. Although preoccupied with his work addressing problems in the city, Hart never stopped thinking about the 735 missing Florentine masterpieces. In mid-November, he received news that sent his spirits soaring. 2 months had passed since he and Giovanni Poggi, superintendent of Florentine galleries, had met with Archbishop of Florence, Cardinal Elia Dalla Costa, to seek the Vatican's assistance in locating the works stolen by German troops. Hart had hoped for a quicker reply, but with the passing of days, then weeks, he assumed that Vatican officials had decided not to use their extensive network of contacts to pursue the matter. A phone call from Poggi rekindled his hopes. The Archbishop had finally received a reply from the Vatican. Hart nearly burst with excitement. If Vatican officials knew nothing, they probably wouldn't have wasted time writing a letter or responding at all. They must know something. He wanted Poggi to blurt it out, and he did. According to the Vatican Secretariat of State, the works of art were stored in the Alto Adige in a place called Numilons in Sand. Finally, a name, a place. Hart quickly grabbed a map of northern Italy. The Alto Adige region, a mountainous German-speaking portion of Italy that shared borders with Switzerland and Austria, was a perfect hiding spot. At a moment's notice, the works could be spirited across the Italian border into Nazi-controlled Austria. But despite his best effort, Hart couldn't find Numilons in Sand on the map or in any Italian guidebook, which meant the monuments men were right back where they had started. 5 days later, Hart received new information from an Italian freedom fighter. At the end of July, 2 German trucks loaded with the stolen works of art taken from Florence arrived at a villa near the town of Modena. Wehrmacht troops offloaded many of the paintings and used them to decorate the villa for a large party that German military officials had hosted in early August. Mid-month, they reloaded their war booty back onto the trucks and headed north. Destination unknown. Hart's emotions were a roller coaster of news. 1 minute hopeful that someone would at least confirm the works were safe, regardless of where they were located. The next, dejected at not knowing anything. He slept only slightly better on December 9th, when Nazi sympathetic Italian officials announced that they had been allowed to inspect the works of art. But for slight damage, the works of art were safe. They made no mention of where the stolen art was hidden. For all Hart knew, it might very well be in Nazi Germany. With the Allied armies digging in for winter, mired in the central mountains hundreds of miles from northern Italy, there wasn't much Hart could do about it anyway. Finding the Florentine treasures, to Hart's great frustration, would have to wait until spring, when offensive operations resumed. Brussels, Belgium, November 1944. The British monuments man for the 1st Canadian Army, Ronald Balfour, spent much of October and November at various harbors along the Belgian coast searching for clues about the whereabouts of Michelangelo's masterpiece, the Bruges Madonna. The concentration of Allied troops on the ground and Allied superiority in the sky would have made an overland route far too risky. The sailors who stole the priceless sculpture and paintings at gunpoint must have loaded it onto a ship and then steamed through the North Sea to reach Germany. If the ship hadn't departed from a Belgian port, it must have sailed from one in the Netherlands. Balfour never made it, though. On November 29th, disaster struck when his vehicle crashed. He suffered a broken ankle and other cuts and bruises. Doctors at the hospital in Eindhoven insisted that he be sent back to England for care, but he refused. He would be of no use to the MFAA there, so he finagled a transfer to a Brussels hospital instead. Being hospital-bound meant suspending his search for the Bruges Madonna, but it didn't prevent the search from continuing. Each day for 3 weeks, British Captain George Wilmore, a recent addition to the expanding group of monuments officers, stopped by the hospital to see Balfour, not as a visitor, but as a student. Working from his bed, Balfour shared his field experiences with Wilmot, including details about the theft of the Bruges Madonna. On that last day, he reached into his field pack, rummaged around for a few seconds, pulled out one of the postcards given to him by Reverend Deschepper at the church in Bruges, and handed it to Wilmore, just in case the newcomer needed it. Aachen, Germany, November 1944. In late October, monuments men Walker Hancock and George Stout began their search for the 6 boys in the fire brigade in Brand, a suburb of Aachen. Walking door to door, making inquiries seemed fruitless until an old woman pointed to a nearby home. Hancock pulled the list of names out of his pocket as he approached the residence, then knocked on the door and asked to see Helmut Jansen. After a bit of commotion, a frightened but composed boy came to the door. Hancock thought he looked about 17 years old. One by one, the other boys appeared. Hancock introduced himself and told the boys that they were needed in Aachen to resume their work protecting the cathedral. With that, he handed them the civilian clothes Father Stephanie had provided and told them to change. The local combat commander who had accompanied the 2 monument officers watched in disbelief. "Well, I'll be damned," he said to himself, as much as to Hancock and Stout. "Here they are, at least safe, and when you tell them they can go back into that hellhole, they act as if you'd given them $1,000 apiece. I can't figure it out." But the 2 monuments men understood perfectly well. The cathedral, Aachen's most important monument, had defined the city since its construction. It hadn't survived centuries of war and turmoil by accident. The fire brigade boys proudly continued the tradition of preserving it for future generations, even at the risk of their lives. In fact, they considered it an honor. In early November, a new threat emerged that Stout believed would marginalize his skills and disrupt the MFAA at a time when it was gaining traction. Some Army planner had issued new orders transferring him out of 1st Army to a new position with Army groups fighting in the Netherlands. In the 4 months since arriving in France, Stout had survived bombs and booby traps. He wasn't about to succumb to the Army's bureaucracy. Stout didn't complain. He never complained. Instead, he immediately went to work using Army regulations to press his case. He formally requested reconsideration of the order. The response came back quickly. Request denied on grounds he was specifically qualified for the assignment. Stout agreed that he was qualified, but he believed that his present assignment with 1st Army in Germany, where most of the stolen objects would likely be found, was the optimal use of his skills. 1st Army's acting Chief of Staff for Civil Affairs concurred and forwarded Stout's request up the chain of command all the way to General Omar Bradley's headquarters at 12th Army Group. On November 6th, Stout receives new orders containing another surprise. The previous orders transferring him to the Netherlands mission were rescinded. Stout would now be the emergency inspector for 12th Army Group, which included 1st, 3rd, 9th, and 15th Armies. Monuments officers assigned to these armies would be in the lead with the combat troops, identifying situations needing special attention, including, everyone anticipated, discoveries of stolen works of art. Stout would be the man on call, like a trauma doctor, ready to respond to emergencies. Despite the distraction caused by the series of orders, Stout continued his inspections. He also made a day trip to Paris where local authorities discussed information indicating that much of what had been stolen from France had been shipped to southern Germany. Stout found this only mildly helpful. Southern Germany covered a vast amount of territory with extensive mountainous areas. What he and other monuments men needed were detailed leads, captured German documents, and luck if they were to find the loot. Okay, we're going to stop there right before the last paragraph on page 123. Thank you so much, 8th grade students. Hope you're doing well. Take care.